The views expressed on this podcast are Peter Dekom's opinions based on his legal experience, research, and academic work. The podcast does not offer legal advice. For any legal matters, always consult an independent attorney who can assess your specific situation. And now, on with the show.
Hi, everybody. It's Peter Dekom again. And if I were pissed last time, I'm at a new level of heat. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a story. Once upon a time, there was a war, and it was a bad war, and millions of people were killed. It was awful. And as a result of that war, the winners imposed on the losers onerous terms. Every citizen had to give up their wealth. Major chunks of land in the loser were ceded to one of the allied winners. And basically, the losers were forced to live in a world where if you want a cup of coffee, if that was your thing, you basically need a suitcase full of currency if anyone would take it anyway. People live this way. And there was a gentleman, there was a treaty that said, loser, you can't build up a military. Loser, you have to bow down when we ask you to do something. And if you don't do A, B, and C, we confiscate more of your territory. We'll pick the more valuable parts because that's what we want. And that happened. So that went on for a while, and the people in the loser country were really, really depressed. Everything cost more, life sucked, and they basically found a champion. The champion basically found conspiracy theories everywhere. He blamed ethno-religious groups for the problem and basically said, I don't give a shit what the treaty says. I'm going to build my country's military back to where it's never been before. The name of that leader is Adolf Hitler. He really lived, he really did all that stuff, and it really, really was nasty. It was not a good event. As you know, that World War II, that we had a British prime minister named Neville Chamberlain, and Neville Chamberlain and the Allies kept telling Hitler, okay, I know you invaded the Bohemian Czech area, I know you took over Austria, just promise you won't do it anymore. And Hitler said, oh, of course not. Then there was a whole thing with Soviet Union, all back and forth treaties. Let me just say that when Germany massively invaded Poland, 1939, World War II began, and Neville Chamberlain, his ass was thrown out and replaced with Winston Churchill. The lesson to be learned is if you appease, you lose. If you're correct in your moral judgment, if you're standing up for what's right, then be firm in that and stop giving bad guys permission to be worse, because it never works out. It's like an addiction. If you get someone hooked on some sort of like heroin, fentanyl, whatever it is, they never say, okay, just give me a shot and I'll never use it again. The addiction is to the power that dictators have in their blood. And you don't satisfy them by saying, okay, well, we won't do that anymore. That is never going to work. So I'm now at a situation where I'm looking at the United States of America, place of my birth, place I've been educated, I've traveled a lot, and I'm terrified. I'm looking at a world where if you have not lived in an occupied city, in Los Angeles, where I live, and I may leave here, Los Angeles is an occupied city. Not as bad as Portland, not as bad as, Minneapolis, but nonetheless, you feel it. And you know when people like J.D. Vance announce to the world that federal agents have absolute immunity, you wonder where the hell he got his law degree. And then I realize it's the best law school in the world, so he knows better. He knows he's lying. There is no absolute immunity for anybody except the president, and that hopefully will be overturned by the Supreme Court that in 2004, United States versus Trump, or Trump versus the United States, determined the president had absolute immunity when acting as a president in his official capacity, and presumed immunity where he was acting kind of in an official capacity. That's a horrible ruling. It basically says presidents can stand on Fifth Avenue and Central Park, whatever, and kill somebody as long as you're basically, that's a terrorist. It's related to my job of protecting the country. It's an immoral decision, but morality is leaving our country like a rocket. So currently, while we're sitting here recording this, J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio are in the White House meeting with the Danish foreign minister and the Icelandic foreign minister to negotiate something. But let me sort of put it like it is, and here it goes. President Trump said today that anything less, that's actually, we're recording on the 14th. President Trump said that anything less than getting Greenland would be unacceptable. And literally what he said is owning it, not like a lease. And from a treaty the United States and Denmark entered into in 1951, the United States has an unlimited right to station troops, military bases, etc., anywhere in Greenland without restriction. At one point, we had 17 bases in Greenland. Today, we just have one. But what Trump is saying is Russian and Chinese boats are everywhere around Greenland. Not true. We don't want to let Greenland fall into Russian or Chinese hands, so we conquer it first. You know, at the end of all of this stuff, Europe is sitting there looking at this and saying, wait a minute, we have this thing called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, otherwise NATO, and we're in a situation where if anybody invades any of our member states, we have an obligation to protect. And that includes if a member state invades another member state and it's not resolved through diplomacy, we are treaty committed to support the country that is being invaded. Denmark and Greenland are currently one country. Yes, Greenland is an autonomous territory, but it is Danish. And if you look at all the polls that have been taking place in Greenland, those huge population of 57,000 people, they are now almost unanimous in saying we would like to be Greenlandic or Danish, but the one thing we do not want is to be part of the United States of America. And there are all these hats that people are wearing there. America, go away. They look like they Make America Great hats, but they basically say, America, go away. Same hats that were used in Canada when we announced that we were going to make Canada possibly the 51st state. And now we're looking to invade maybe Colombia, maybe Mexico. We're going to bomb Iran again, maybe. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And I have to tell you, if you invade another country, and with the intention of taking it over, I don't think you have to say we're at war. I think just invading with the intent to conquer is a declaration of war. And that purview to declare war, to make those decisions, rests solely with the United States Congress. You can't do it on your own. Trump was asked, are there any limits to your global aspirations? Can you be stopped by anything in the global environment? And he said, no, the only thing that stops me is my own morality. I won't go into the obvious observation at that juncture, but I'm looking at a guy that I don't think he's playing with a full deck, but he has malevolence behind that failure. We'll go into more of that in a moment, but he's no longer doubling down, he's tripling down. Is this just a big distraction from the Epstein files or the failed tariff system? He keeps talking about affordability as the Democratic word that is a hoax. The word hoax, I don't get it. So how many years does it take to pull off a hoax at that level, order of magnitude? It's pretty obvious that he's wrong. Everybody knows better. He's asking us not to believe our eyes, not to believe the numbers that we're paying at the grocery store, not to look at the cost of housing. He's asking, just believe what I'm saying. I'm telling you, it's wonderful. You're happy. The other day, he actually met with the workers in Detroit, and he made a lovely speech, after which he did a lovely little YMCA dance. I don't know that he still realizes or doesn't realize it's a gay anthem, but whatever. And he basically was telling all these rich people in Detroit and then the workers that he met with afterwards how much he's accomplished and how much his big, beautiful bill has helped everybody. Well, don't feel terrible because it's going to get worse. He has another big, beautiful Part 2 bill, and the reason he's proposing it is because as they're proposing the budget for the going forward years, and that's imminent, we're supposed to be dealing with it now, he doesn't have to face a filibuster in the Senate, which is the only place there is a filibuster, if it is called a reconciliation bill, i.e., the House passes a budget appropriation, and the reconciliation of the budget does not require a 60% clearance vote in the Senate. It just requires a senatorial majority, which he's virtually certain he will get. I don't think so, but that's what he thinks. To make it seem even more exciting and fun and exciting it's so amazing. He's asked for a 50%, I'll repeat that, a 50%, that equals literally $500 billion, 50% increase in our defense budget. Huh? Normally, these defense budgets go up by 2, 3, 4, 5% max. He's asking for 50%. Huh? What? What could he possibly need? Oh, I'm building these great new battleships that are going to be absolutely spectacular. The military has long since determined that battleships are giant targets. It's too risky to put all that armament on one big boat. Because someone might just send 1,000 drones at the same time to attack that ship, either from under the water, on top of the water, or all at the same time. And that little battleship can go bye-bye very quickly. And almost anybody with any military experience looks at that proposal and thinks, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a minus 1,523. There's nothing to be said for it. Almost everything that Donald Trump, who never served a nanosecond in the military, neither has anybody in his family, is determining what military strategy and armaments he thinks are appropriate for the world. Doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Even his own generals behind his back are saying, what? How do we deal with this? Well, let's get back to Greenland. What happens if they don't sell Greenland to us? He said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that the people of Greenland don't want it. It doesn't matter that Denmark doesn't want it. He actually said that's their problem. We're going to get it. We're going to take it. And I'm thinking to myself, that's really a wonderful thing to state. But if that happens, if he really even steps any military personnel with the intention to take Greenland into the country, I think NATO is dead, which means we're alone. We have no allies of any kind whatsoever. We're sitting there floating on an island, and everybody on the planet hates us. I don't think there are any exceptions now, and that's really very frightening, because if you're a small country, small in terms of military power, it could be large in terms of size, Mexico being, for example, one example. You're looking at this and thinking, could that be me? Could that be my country? What if I say or do something he doesn't like? He's a bully. Even school kids understand that until you beat up the bully will, if they keep getting what they want, they will never stop asking for more. So somehow we have got to figure out how to stop the bully. So why is Greenland so valuable? As we've seen, the invasion, or the decapitation of the leadership of Venezuela, was not a regime change. We didn't actually, when we were blowing up these little boats, we didn't actually stop any material import of narcotics into the United States. Most of those boats were heading somewhere else. So basically, what was it about? Everyone said, well, it can't be about, stopping drugs, because it has no impact on that. So maybe it's about regime change. Regime change is not what happened. We had leadership change. So what Donald Trump did, he went in and said, I'm the acting president of Venezuela. He even posted that with his picture on it on Wikipedia and other places. There's something strange about that. I'm the acting president of Venezuela. And he left all the horrific, torturous police, the secret prisons, the military, the entire infrastructure of government, with one condition: we get your oil. Now, he believes that this country, which has very thick, nasty oil, it's not exactly like pure, pristine oil. You really have to refine it a lot. It's heavy, heavy oil. And it does represent approximately, and we don't know this for sure, but as of now, measurements tell us that Venezuela accounts for 17% of the global oil reserves, and yet its exports are 1% of global oil. We also know that in the decades since Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro took over this country, all the infrastructure for oil production, storage, and distribution has disintegrated almost into oblivion. It turns out that all the money that the Venezuelans were allocating for upgrading oil facilities somehow wound in the pockets of corrupt officials. Okay, that's wonderful. We love corruption. It's so good. It's so good. I'll ask Tom Homan to explain it to me someday. But it's really good to have corruption because it flows money around at the top. In the meantime, this country is really, really in bad shape. Bad oil, hard to extract, hard to refine, and facilities that don't exist. So Donald Trump calls together all the executives of the major oil companies and into the White House and said, you guys are lucky. We're going to take over, and all this oil, you guys are going to go in there. You're going to get your first dibs on this lovely source of oil. Lucky you. And they're looking at him and looking at each other saying, wait a minute, oil prices are in the toilet. There's a glut of oil right now. We would have to spend tens of billions of dollars just to get up to the 3.5% exports that it used to be. Right now, it's not even 1 million barrels a day. It's about 840,000. I mean, it's a lot if you listen to it, but in the oil world, that's a fairly small amount of oil. So they're saying, you're asking us to put up billions and billions of dollars to repair this place in a country that hates us, where everybody in the country, if they could, would probably take a shot at some of us. And you're asking us to go in and invest a lot of money. To which Trump said, don't worry, we'll guarantee you stability, we'll guarantee you all the stuff, and we'll guarantee your investment. I'm thinking to myself, we want to invest in oil in the United States as its price declines, as demand for oil decreases, and we want taxpayers to spend that money to guarantee it. What's wrong with this picture? Well, you don't need me to tell you what's wrong with the picture. It's stupid. And the CEO of Exxon sort of said, you know what? It's uninvestable. And that means it's not worth putting your money into. And he's totally right. And everybody sitting at that table with the president were absolutely convinced of the same thing. But because he said it, Trump later said, well, maybe you don't get to get called to the table. Exxon can sit on the side, to which I'm sure he was saying, whew. I look at the, people who do things, and I know there's a major backlash against elites in the world, but anybody who knows anything about oil, and, I lived in the Middle East, and I understand the importance of oil in an area. I understand what it was a long time ago, and I also understand what it is today. Today, Iran is unraveling, and everyone's saying, yeah, that political system didn't work, theocracy didn't work. The people have to spend too much. We can't sell enough of our oil. To which I ask, what does that have to do with the fact that there's almost no water in Tehran? Huh? A whole large metropolitan city doesn't have any water. How do you think that does for the people leading that country? So clearly, the Ayatollah better leave, is thinking about exiting. But that country, Trump is saying, you kill people in there, we're going to get you. There have been thousands of people killed already, 18,000 people detained, and he's having high-speed trials so that you get tried, and within a week you get executed. It's clear, what is he going to do? He's going to do something. He's opened his big mouth and said, we're coming to your rescue. So the credibility of the United States and the presidency are at stake, but Iran is not an oil country that is going to save itself with oil. Even Saudi Arabia is busy developing tech alternatives, inviting people to do other things in the Saudi area, same with the Emirates, same with Kuwait, same with Qatar. All these places understand the world does not want more oil. And right now in the United States, we are looking at probably between now and 2030, a demand of $3 to $4 trillion that are needed to continue to build the data centers that drive AI, and we need massive amounts more energy. So what does Trump do? We're going to get it through oil. No, we're not. It's not going to happen that way. It's zero chance. Meanwhile, China is building infrastructure and weaning itself from oil and coal. Still uses a lot, but they're doing something about it, and they're building fast. And they're kind of saying, thank you, Donald, thank you, Donald, thank you, Donald, every time he makes a decision, because they're all bad decisions. I've never seen a president of the United States make sequentially this many decisions with this type of a global impact. We're the laughing stock of the planet. Not that I'm laughing, I'm not. So you have a man who's been obsessed with Greenland's riches for a long time, and Greenland is not an oil place. Well, what's there? How about rare earth minerals and other minerals that are just begging to be mined, except for one tiny detail? The weather in Greenland sucks. You know, it's 70% covered in ice. The permafrost is pretty much permafrosty. There isn't an easy access to any of their major mineral wealth. Everything that you extract from Greenland costs 5 to 10 times more to extract than if it were in an ordinary place. But China has rare earths, so we don't want them to have rare earths. We want to dig up Greenland and take those things out. How about there's other technologies that are creating substitutes for rare earths using stuff like, aluminum. We're not actually bound to be in only using rare earths or only using cobalt, etc. There are alternatives, and there are things called research. Well, Donald Trump doesn't like research because it requires brain power and intellectual capacity, and it requires research funding. He doesn't like that. He wants everything to be exactly the way he assumes it would. Now, if you go back to the United States as it looked in 1960, 1970, and you look at all the things Donald Trump is doing, it makes more sense. But I got bad news for him. We're not living in that era. We got rid of the king in 1776. You want to be a king again? Obviously you want to be a king again. You posted pictures of yourself as a king on your own Truth Social. You're telling the world that that's what you want to do. And the people of Greenland, even though there are not a lot of people living there, you might ask yourself why. Why wouldn't anybody want to live in a place that you can get food during the winter only by air supply? There's no place to land. There are not a lot of places to drive. The roads in Greenland are very, very rare. And in effect, it's not particularly habitable. Oh, but, climate change is good for the world, said Trump. He must be thinking that the Northwest Passage melting and all that tundra and stuff basically, melting away is a good thing. There's only one catch with that. If you think about global climate change, you have greenhouse gases. And the two major greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide and something that's 23, 24 times heavier than carbon dioxide. It's called methane. Guess what is trapped in tundra? Tundra basically is the organic materials of millennia. And just like oil. So as the tundra melts, the methane releases. Remember, it's 23, 24 times heavier than carbon dioxide. And then as it releases, it gets hotter. So it melts more ice. And why do we care about melting ice? Because ice reflects light and heat up, whereas dark things, which are what's under the ice, water and land, absorb heat. So it's only making things a lot worse. But Trump doesn't believe it's not good. All right, we have other things going on beside Venezuela, beside a military that doesn't need another 50% kick. We're going to actually take a look at another thing here, and that is a guy named Jerome Powell, whose term as chairman of the Federal Reserve ends next year, although he can elect to stay on the board for another 2 years. And Trump's going to appoint somebody to take over. But as Donald Trump has begun to pursue criminal prosecution against Jerome Powell, good luck with that, Donnie. Ain't going to happen. But the next day, the stock markets crashed and burned. All the central bankers around the world, European bankers said, if you eliminate the independence of the Federal Reserve and you put it directly under the heel of the executive branch of the government, nobody on this planet is going to have faith in the United States financial system anymore. And your currency, which has already dropped 9.5% since Trump took office, is going to fall into the floor. So if you want to do that, you're not going to wind up being the reserve currency. That's the currency by which most natural resource and international transactions are measured, you're not going to be, the dollar isn't going to be the delineating currency. It may be the euro, it may be some blended currency, it may actually wind up being the renminbi yuan, which is Chinese, but it's not going to be the dollar by itself. That's probably over, especially if you take away the independence of the Federal Reserve. The one constant, the reason the world has such faith in the United States is because the Federal Reserve basically provides independence and stability. I could go into it a lot longer, but I did earlier. I did an entire podcast on the Federal Reserve. I strongly recommend you listen to that one if you didn't already, and I think it would be very, very, very important for you to do that. Meanwhile, what's Congress doing all this? Well, let's look. There's a guy named Randy Fine, and he's a Republican representative from Florida. He just introduced a bill to authorize President Trump to take such steps as may be necessary to annex the Danish territory of Greenland. Huh? If Congress passes that, I would be stunned. But the one good thing is if it goes before Congress, they're unlikely to basically vote to pass that bill. And so we have an interesting situation here where little ripples of congressional resistance are popping up here and there. He's lost some labor statutes that he wanted to pass. And as I said, there's the great big beautiful bill Part 2. Part 2 basically takes away environmental controls, allows the government to take pieces of litigation against the government as taxes and other forms of taxes on litigation proceeds. It also basically takes the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, and makes anything that has to do with enforcing pollution controls obsolete. So what happens here is little businesses no longer have any regulation. They can do whatever they want. You know, U.S. people, you guys can pay more than you've ever paid for anything you like. And you're not going to have a good time because everything's going to be more expensive. And by the way, were any of you planning on taking a trip to Europe anytime soon? Are you going to be wearing your new cashmere Kevlar combination? People don't like Americans, even if you hate Trump. The fact that you're an American is a member of a country that somehow elected Trump by several million votes, passed, whatever it is. That he says it's a landslide, obvious it's not. He also has people in Congress like Mini-Me, Mike Johnson, who must have a chip in his head that goes into a Trump control mechanism because he's incapable of thinking for himself or understanding that he is now on the losing side. Are we all doing this just because we don't want the Epstein papers to be released? Well, it seems that Mr. Trump is getting to be very unhappy with Pam Bam 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 Bondi because she can't control the Epstein papers. She can't keep justice, U.S. attorneys in office able to prosecute Trump's enemies. Forget about, Comey, forget about it. You can't do it. Letitia James, she's walking around smiling a lot. And Trump is fuming because he ran on retribution. If there has to be one thing in his quiver that he cares about more than life itself, it's retribution. He wants to punish anybody who opposes him. Doesn't matter if, you certainly don't see me or hear me on this podcast, you can assume that somebody was pissed at me and took me down. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that important, but you never know. Now, let's look at the ICE agents. In Germany, we had a mixture of ICE agents. Some were called stormtroopers, some were called Gestapo, but they would say things, Ihren Papieren bitte, your papers, please. What? Your papers, please? Yes, ICE agents, according to J.D. Vance, are going to go door to door, house to house in places where they've been deployed and ask people to prove their identification. Feel comfortable? Seem like something that you would expect in the United States? Es sieht bei mir ein bisschen bizarr aus. It's not so good, nicht wahr? It is not good at all. But for some reason, J.D. Vance thinks, warrants? Who needs warrants? That constitutional provision is so old world. Who needs the First Amendment? There are actually people out there saying, I think we just ignore the First Amendment because it interferes with police trying to do their job, which is, what is their job? Whatever Trump says it is. If Trump wants to get rid of an entire ethnic group, that's their job. So as long as free speech hinders that, or they're taking videos of people getting the shit kicked out of them. We had protesters, American citizens who've been blinded by ICE attacks. We've had one, Renee Good, who was executed. And now they're saying, oh, but that agent, he has internal bleeding. What is it, a week and a half, 2 weeks later? Come on, folks. If he were injured, you would have probably noticed it right away. He wasn't hit. I've looked at every available video on that, and I do not see anything that resembles, as Trump said, he ran him over, actually ran him over. No, he didn't. And I'm looking at this and saying, if you add the concept of J.D. Vance's absolute immunity with ICE agents who can cover up their faces and have no other identifying marks on them, carrying with them, and they can shoot and they have they can kill anybody. Well, he sure looked like a terrorist to me. And that little 37-year-old mommy driving her mommy mobile, a Honda Pilot, which I think is a quintessential mommy mobile. And she has all these kids, and you look, when she said, I'm not mad at you, you look beyond her, you'll see little stuffed animals. They must have been loaded with C4 or other explosive, because how else could a terrorist operate? And you listen to Pam Bam 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 Bondi explaining how she is a classic domestic terrorist. Huh? You know, in my mind's eye, when you fight against the Constitution and you refuse to comply with court orders and you use your forces, whether they're in the neighboring, Homeland Security group or your FBI agents, I think you're the terrorist. And what's fascinating is a lot of this, we're going to investigate all these organizations, we're going to blah, 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 blah. But now the Republican senators say maybe what we need to be investigating is the Department of Justice. And Pam Bam 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 Bondi, to me, is like, not a whole lot better than Himmler or any of the other people who aided and abetted Adolf Hitler to go crazy. Speaking of crazy, I'm looking at Donald Trump. I remember when we actually announced a successful the confiscation and uplifting of Nicolas Maduro. And he stood there with all these generals talking about their tactics and all the wonderful stuff that they did. And he went to sleep standing up. This guy is good. I can't do that. He obviously doesn't have insomnia, or if he has insomnia, it's sporadic. He was asleep on his feet. And he basically was asked in an interview, I think I mentioned this, that when are people going to get those $2,000 checks you promised? And he responded, did I say that? He's not remembering what he said. He's doing that YMCA dance I talked about earlier. He's basically fantasizing about being president and having no limits other than his own very, very ill-defined and obviously not particularly strong sense of morality. I don't think he's sane. I think my opinion is, this guy is a 25th Amendment special, but unfortunately, he's surrounded himself with sycophantic loyalists who will never invoke the 25th Amendment because some of them are equally culpable. For example, on some of those attacks where we entered Venezuelan airspace, we disguised some of our aircraft as civilian aircraft. That's pretty stealthy and smart, huh? It's also a war crime. Now, maybe we don't understand or appreciate the international criminal courts, but I have a sneaking suspicion when this administration is gone, and it will because Trump isn't old and is old and decrepit. I have a feeling that a lot of the people who are part of this administration will find themselves on the receiving end of indictments, if not within the United States, then maybe from overseas. So Pete, I think his title is Secretary of Machismo. I'm not sure. I might have gotten that wrong. I basically don't like women unless they're making love to me. I'm a manly man. Look at my muscles. Oh, I'm strong. My tats are strong. Or basically, oh, you're black? Well, I'm going to pull all those things that dedicated the heroes of World War II who were African-American. We're getting rid of those. We're a white nationalist Christian country, and that's all that matters. He's not even subtle about it. What do you do with a president who's putting his name on as many things as he possibly can, trying to take the Nobel Peace Prize from the woman who actually was awarded that prize, requiring the Nobel Committee in Oslo to say, no, you can't give the Peace Prize that you got to somebody else. And he was furious at those awful Norwegians. Maybe he won't even eat any of their salmon or whatever else it is. So as ICE, which to me is an illegal police force violating the Constitution daily, is basically out there recently executing as innocent a woman as you could possibly imagine, with lots of video to show what that awfulness is. Oh, do people just say, oh, okay, that's the way it goes? No, we had one of the largest, if not the largest, spontaneous protests across all the major cities of the United States and a lot of smaller cities, with tens of thousands of people in each venue protesting the execution of this woman. Now, to make matters worse, I think one of the strengths, and I use that with an ironic, sly grin, strengths of the Trump administration is they are cover-up experts non pari, without parallel. So, if we have the possibility of proving that that ICE agent had no reasonable justification or fear for himself, and that's determined by a full and complete investigation, obviously we can't let there be a full and complete, investigation, because it's going to prove that the guy was completely unjustified in firing 3 bullets into her face. And you got to look at the videos. I mean, I even got the ones that were, he was he had a cam on him. I looked at everything, every angle. I've seen so many videos. There is nothing I have seen whatsoever. So we get this gaslight thing. What you're seeing isn't true. Prices are down. He defended himself against a domestic terrorist. It was him or her. And you look at her just running, fleeing from the scene, getting away as quickly as she could. Now, days later, a woman who was basically trying to get to see her doctor, who was handicapped, and ICE agents came to her and said, "Get out, stop your car, get out, get out." She can't get out. She's handicapped. They pull her out. They cut her seatbelt. They smash her window, pull her out on the ground, arrest her, and take her away. Is that America? Not my America. And that's why we have to resist irreparable harm. This is just a little bit and piece of it. And I repeat, if Joe Rogan finds this to be a little bit like Gestapo-like tactics, if he's saying that on his podcast, OMG. I agree with you, Joe. Thank you for standing up for our country. It's very, very, very interesting. So I'm going to make a few observations. Remember I said if you go to Europe, you don't count on being welcomed with open arms. It's worse than that. They've been taking surveys. Let me pull something out here that I love the quote. This is asking Brits, one of our closest allies. People in England actually sort of like us. God only knows why. So they're basically saying, okay, Brits, would you consider moving to the United States? This is the best quote that I got. It's an absolute dump. And as you look at the responses of all these people, there are almost no responses that say, yeah, we're not as good as the United States. We have more freedom. Everybody interviewed, and maybe it was biased from the interviews that were taken, but I will tell you, everyone I heard from and all the international periodicals that I look at, take a look at all of the stuff and say, you know what? Who wants to live in the United States? Remember, Trump was railing because only shithole countries were sending their people to the United States. We can't even get shithole residents to come to the United States. And we sure as hell can't get the lily white people that he wants, except in South Africa, where for whatever reason, land reform to take back land that was taken from the people that live there is enough to say, no, they're white. You can't do that. White people have to get their land back. It's the way it is. So meanwhile, in the United States, aside from the fact that we have nobody going to see stuff at the Kennedy Center, I'm sorry, it's not the Trump, whatever, nothing to do with Trump. They're not going. People are canceling. Well, they're all left-wing radicals. They love that, left-wing radicals. Maybe you should use radishes. At least radishes look cute. And you look at this notion where, all the people who are building those lovely, lovely additions to the White House, they're making donations. So taxpayers are not going to have to be saddled with any of those costs. And by the way, as big as that East Wing looks, I think it's a little off balance. I think we have to do the same thing to the West Wing, which I thought was a TV series. But whatever else, they're now looking at doing that too. And they're all donations, just like the donations for the inauguration, the donations for the various political events. Let me tell you something about donations when most of the people donating are doing business with the government, where they either want to be exempted from tariffs, or where they want government contracts, or where they want their economic activities that are subject to government approvals, like the FCC, SEC, FTC, Department of Justice, etc. How come those are the people who are making the donations? Is it because they love our country, or because they're basically bribing the president? You make your own mind, but take a look at the people there and what their relationship is to the government. I'll give you a little example here. Ever heard of a company called Meta? Facebook thing? Well, it does seem pretty obvious that we have a new Mark Zuckerberg knows he has to look good to Donnie Trump. And what he does is he decided to hire a new president and vice chairman of Meta. Totally metabolic. Yes, it really is. Meta named Dina Powell McCormick, an investment banker who has a very powerful Goldman Sachs resume. She's worked hard. She's also the president's advisor. And she also is so right-wing and so completely sycophantic to Mr. Trump that how could Zuckerberg resist? He'll put her in there, and if for some reason Trump loses power, he'll just fire her. But understand, everywhere within the industry, we're seeing this in that lovely battle between Trump friend Larry Ellison and David Ellison in the acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery. All these political realities. Look at the people who are taken off the air. Jimmy Kimmel got back on, but, ABC has some licenses to be reviewed, and Stephen Colbert only got an extension. He didn't get a permanent position on CBS. Look what's happening at CBS News. They're firing anybody who basically is not following the conservative line. That's kind of like what's going on in the country. So even as Trump threatens to send troops to pick up the voting machines after the next, round of midterms, even as he tries to gerrymander his way around or create laws or regulations which basically clearly keep people who are not Republican-oriented from voting, it's not likely that he's going to wind up in the midterms, if we have them. And there's talk about canceling them. He doesn't like them. And I don't know why we're having these elections. We did such a good job. We were so great. Why do we need elections? It's obvious who they should pick. So I'm looking at all this stuff and I'm thinking to myself, if we don't have the election, we're over. If we invade Greenland and we're fired from NATO, we are really in trouble. And so everybody out there, it doesn't matter if all you're doing is standing out in the cold with a sign objecting. You don't want to bait them or provoke them, but you do want to let them know, like most Americans, the majority of Americans, object to what Mr. Trump has said. His economic policy sucks. Believe your grocery bill, the little tag that comes in at the end of when you're at the cash register, look at it. Go look at the prices. And he tells you it's all going down. Come on, folks. Stand up. Make your voice heard, seen, understood. Do it not for me, for yourself, for your country, if you care. I'm Peter Dekom, and I'm pissed, but I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
If you would like to give feedback, suggestions for new topics, or have a question that might be selected for a future podcast, please email us at dekompodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.